Since the death on the 7th of January 2026 of Renee Good in Minneapolis, Minnesota, a lot of people on the internet are talking about what's going on with white, progressive, and liberal women and their ever more deranged activism. I want to explain that using one really small but very telling example from the kind of social justice culture that America has been swimming in for quite a long time, but in a very acute way since in the last decade or so. And I'm going to use that, or I'm going to do that by holding a mini story hour featuring this book, Not My Idea, A Book About Whiteness, which is by an author called Anastasia Higginbotham. Nice posh name there. This book was published in 2018, and as you can see, it's meant for really young children. It's a board book, so hardback, with mostly illustrations and very few words. And that's how we know that it's meant for really little kids, like preschool kids, before they've learned to read. And I'll get into this book in a second. But what's important to note is that, well, this is just a book, and a book among many, trashy, kind of race-baiting, woke books meant to indoctrinate American children. This is one of the worst examples I've ever seen of an explicit attempt to traumatize and disturb white children in particular for the color of their skin. And the case that I'm going to make after we look at this book is that someone like Renee Good has been participating and has been affected by this totally condoned form of culture and education for children in the United States. So I'm going to skip right to the worst part of this book. This plot of it is that a young girl, a small child, has her mother trying to explain to her police killings of, I think it's in this case, a Black man, and why she, as a child, bears some responsibility towards that. And it builds up to finally, at the very end of the book, on page 59, the child is offered a contract. The contract is binding you to whiteness. You get stolen lands, stolen riches, special favors, and whiteness gets to mess endlessly with the lives of your friends, neighbors, loved ones, and all fellow humans of color for the purposes of profit. Your soul, sign below. And there's a little caveat: land, riches, and favors may be revoked at any time for any reason. And here we see the fire, burning earth, the dollar, the filthy dollar. And look at that, a devil's tail. So it's actually telling the child that they are signing a contract. They're signing their soul with the devil simply by existing. Ergo, the child is akin to a devil just by existing as a white child with white skin in America. Whiteness is a bad deal. It always was. Dude, we can see your pointy tail. So here we go. White children are the devil. White children are minions of the devil. That is what this book, which was written by a white woman, of course, is telling young American children who read it. Tell me that's not evil. How much more evil can you possibly be? Very interestingly, this wording here, to mess endlessly with the lives of your friends, neighbors, loved ones, and all fellow humans of color, that language is explicitly and almost identically reproduced by white women all over social media who are right now going out there and protesting about ICE enforcement actions to remove illegal immigrants from the United States. They are often, always talking about they are going to stand in the line for their neighbors, friends, and loved ones of color. This book is not necessarily, I'm not saying this book was Renee Good's favorite book. I have no idea if she ever read it or not, or ever came across it. What I am saying is that this book is the perfect encapsulation of the kind of racially toxic social justice woke ideology that so many American progressive women are currently in the grips of. If you ascribe to this idea that your whiteness has given you stolen lands, stolen riches, and what was the other word? Special favors. Side note, I have yet to receive my stolen lands and stolen riches despite my evident whiteness. So what's up with that, devil? Where's my loot? But if you ascribe to this vile and I think implicitly genocidal ideology, you're taught, basically brainwashed, to hate your ancestors. You should be grateful to your ancestors, of course, because without them and their ability to survive, you would not exist. But in teaching you to hate your ancestors, it also cuts you off from an important part of yourself, the part of yourself that is rooted in the human whole, the human past, the part of your story that gives you, the individual, your context and your legacy. And if you hate that, and if you denigrate that, and if you think that your ancestors were poisonous evildoers, then you yourself are poisoned. That can drive a person insane. And the American liberal establishment has condoned and actively participated in, even shoved down the throats for decades now, this kind of emotional and intellectual destruction, specifically targeted at children and young people via the teaching of this vile ideology. My contention is that Renee Good was herself destroyed mentally in this way. Andy No did some excellent reporting, finding her Venmo account and noting that her profile picture had a BLM frame on it, and that she sent money to someone for the purposes of terrorism. But it also noted that her own mother had sent her money to pay her bills because she was so lost to the LARP that she was no longer a functioning adult, but a full-time cosplayer pretending to be a revolutionary and a poet. Over the last few years, I've gone from thinking that we are in a culture war to we are in an information war to we are in a psychological war to we are in a spiritual war. And the targets of this war are those people who were once fairly normal, unpolitical people who at a different time would have just lived their lives alongside whatever opinions they held. But now they are radicalized. Renee is one of those people. And with her death, she's also a victim. When I say victim, I'm offering it as an observation, not a stamp of moral approval. Far from it. Progressive liberals, like her and many others, activists, have proved themselves over and over again to be networked, dangerous political radicals who would rather see their own country burn than compromise in common sense ways with their political opposition. They are the definition of threat to democracy. NPR did a segment on Good that described her Pinterest page. And in that awful, cloying NPR voice, they described it as full of the things of a normal human life, ideas for recipes and haircuts, plans for a garden, and tips on parenting, like how to soothe an anxious child, and fun things to do with them in the summer. Of course, NPR is being totally disingenuous when they portray Good as some kind of totally blameless victim who was all sweetness and light. Just watched the video of her smirking from behind the wheel at the agents who were telling her to get out of her car. She clearly did not fear them or what they could do to her at all. Why are women in particular susceptible to this ideology and this type of behavior? Well, for a lot of reasons, mostly to do with the sophisticated psychological hijacking of female empathy and protective instincts, and also because women are particularly susceptible to the anti-white messaging that tells them they are guilty by virtue of their and their ancestors' skin color, and they must atone. Women put a very high value on collaboration and consensus, and feeling like we are responsible for evil is psychically intolerable for many women, and they would do anything to make up for it. But also because in the US there are millions of white liberal women who simply cannot conceive of a world with actual danger. These milk-fed, soft-handed creatures have been pumped up all their lives by girl power and smash the patriarchy propaganda. They are filled with rage and self-abasement from anti-white propaganda as well, which they truly think they need to atone for by throwing themselves at causes that defend Black and brown people. But these women are not serious. They're not serious people. They might be really, really angry. They might seriously believe in what they're doing, but they're not serious people in that they do not realize how high the stakes really are. They are totally clueless about consequences. They have never experienced them. Boys and men experience them all the time. They don't have entire bureaucracies set up with the express purpose of downplaying or absolving boys and men of responsibility for the consequences of their poor choices. Women and girls do. And the same goes for Renee's partner, Rebecca. She was filmed taunting an agent and provoking him. Someone on X described her behavior as quote unquote unearned bellicosity. And that's exactly what it was. It was pathetic. It was an embarrassing to watch, come at me, brah, attitude that would have been kind of funny if it had ended there. But seconds later, her partner was dead. This is 100% a class issue as well. Women of all colors, if they are middle or upper middle class and college educated, most likely have never, ever encountered hard material reality as it presents itself in violence and danger. They've never really quite been made to understand that things like protest dance yoga is not going to protect you from the consequences of impeding federal law enforcement. Hard material reality has now come for Rebecca. There's a haunting photo of her sitting on the frozen sidewalk at the scene of the shooting, her legs splayed, her stunned gaze cast downward as a sad-looking black lab stands beside her. She's processing what her activism has cost. The New York Post reported that she said at the scene, "It's my fault. I made her come down here." And as she said it, her face was smeared with Renee's blood. It's very sad, but it's also pathetic and enraging, because what a waste of human life. It's entirely possible that we're going to move into a kinetic war, a hot war from our cultural, political, information, psychological, and cultural and spiritual war that we're currently in. And that's because women all over the United States have been driven insane by this idea that they have to atone for their toxic whiteness. Young women have had their minds destroyed by this vicious, racist idea. And if it does turn into a hot war, that's certainly what the left wants and what they have been agitating for some time. And they are using women as their vanguard to get us to that point. If you liked this, you can find more of my thoughts at jennieeholland.substack.com. And of course, you can hit that like and subscribe button and see more of my videos. Thank you for saving culture with me.